So the Concept OK Focus exhibit is going to be 4 artists from Oklahoma and then 4 artistic projects from Kansas City area artists. The curator for this area, Liza Staton, really met with a lot of artists to try to figure out who would be best together for this first Focus exhibition. She toured 11 studios in Oklahoma, she toured 10 studios in Kansas City before she chose the projects, and she really was interested in what are those intersections between their ideas? Are there materials, are there different approaches that could have some kind of connection? And she ended up feeling like everything was pretty fluid in the way the artists were approaching their work, but that there was almost a network, a map that connected the different projects. And so even though we have sculpture, we have, multimedia constructions, we have video, that there's some connection between their ideas. It was interesting when Liza Staton approached the project she ended up selecting, she really felt like all of them were trying to engage their viewers, that all of them are trying to provoke their viewers somehow, so pushing their viewers to examine themselves, to look at how they live, to look at contemporary life. So she saw that as a connection between all of them, that they invite the viewers and engage them in a different way.
My work in a lot of ways is about conflict. And my dad is a disabled veteran, and that's really been a pretty strong influence on my work throughout. It took me a while to really realize that was an influence on my work, but I've always had a bent towards imagery that I think a lot of people would probably consider violent. Starting out, I originally sort of trained as a painter and printmaker, and a lot of the work from that time had to do with war imagery and battlefield imagery. And I'm really interested not so much in the conflict itself, but rather in the ways that we deal with conflict. And I think what's interesting about that is that we have developed lots of different strategies for dealing with not just conflict, but with tragedy in general, death in general. And I think that those different strategies are a really interesting avenue to explore in terms of how it affects our lives and affects our everyday rituals, because I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of what we do is based on how we're dealing with our own sort of mortality. My latest work has broadened that idea and been broadened to ideas of conflict that don't deal with strictly war, socio-political conflict, social conflict. And so I think that's allowed me to really begin to explore a broader range of political and social issues with my work that maybe I wasn't ready to or I couldn't before. The work that I've been doing has pushed more towards a performative basis. I have been working with a lot of installation and performance-based pieces that sort of, again, get at these sort of rituals. The first one that I really did that really sort of got the ball rolling for the current work was a piece I did in Buffalo. I did a full body cast of myself out of Meatloaf. It was the first performance that I'd done that really combined all of the aspects of my work. I mean, I had the actual sculptural aspect of creating the cast and making the meatloaf and actually cooking it. But then also there was the one night only performance. There was the idea of an event, of a ritualistic event. There was a real participatory aspect to that work that I really enjoyed. I realized that, rather than in a gallery or museum setting where someone could, see the painting and stand in front of it and contemplate it, but there's no real dialogue, with this work, I'm there as the artist. I'm performing, but I'm also accessible. The people are there, they're performing and participating in the event, and there's a real easiness to our dialogue that happens. I mean, it's just natural. Well, my focus project is called Breaking Bread. The project is a map of Oklahoma with the Native American tribal jurisdictions in map form that will then be covered with food that will be served during the exhibition with some help of some Native folks that I'm talking to. I started initially with a historical map of Oklahoma pre-statehood, so it was just Indian territory, and it was the land, the first time that it had been demarcated by the government as Indian territory. And you have to be really careful with how you utilize maps, because maps are a really visual representation of a power structure. And so it's really opened up a whole new way to think about my project in terms of how I represent the map. Like, what is Oklahoma today? What is the Native experience with Oklahoma today? What does one map say about our state at a certain time versus what it says about our state at a different time? And so the final project, rather than sticking with one particular map, is actually going to end up being a amalgam of different maps throughout history that I think more accurately represent both the historical context and also the current context.
Jeff, as he started approaching this project, he recognized right away he's a non-native artist who's trying to create this work about issues with American Indians, and he wanted to understand better himself the dialogue, the conversations, the tensions, and so he spent a lot of time meeting American Indian activists and artists and curators, and trying to find partners and people who will work with him. So his idea has actually been modified quite a bit from when he started, as he himself has learned, as he hopes that his audience will learn. So it's almost performance in his creation, because he had this thing he wanted to make, and he's letting it change through meeting people who might have a different perspective.
The idea is to have this meal be a springboard to talk about the very real issues facing both the Native and non-Native community in Oklahoma. So I think that the act of eating and prescribing rituals to talk about these issues of conflict and mortality, is a really interesting dichotomy, and that's a lot of what I've been exploring lately in my